Hello and welcome to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. Happy free agency week. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz, joined as always by PFF's own Dwain "The Rock" McFarland. Dwain, I thought it was going to be today where things got crazy. We have had some moments. Sunday was also, really just, crazy carousel going around and around. We last talked on Friday. We got a lot to catch up on, my friend.
Absolutely. But it's all the changes are happening. We're starting to get a new feel for what 2022 fantasy football is going to look like. I love it. Let's do it.
And also a shout out to Christian Kirk. You are freaking rich as shit now. And that's awesome. So as we talk about these contracts, as always, we like to say we do not hate these players. We hate the ADP. I hope every player in the league can make as much money as possible. Dwain, I don't even believe the salary cap should exist. I think that if someone wants to pay a running back $200 million, they should be allowed to. We can talk about parity and all that. But let's focus on the task at hand. That is going through all these moves from the past few days. Thank you, as always, for tuning in, everyone. Let's start off with Monday. Mitch Trubisky taking his talents to the Pittsburgh Steelers on a 2-year deal. Dwain, I get it. It's Mitch Trubisky. We're used to seeing him be a fairly terrible quarterback. We had the nice 2018 stretch and everything, but that was the Bears. Now, the Bears, shout out, Jim McMahon in the 80s, Jay Cutler, maybe. Here's the thing. When I look at the Bears, when I look at Washington, I think to myself, has every single quarterback that has played for this team for the last 30 years truly sucked? Or does it maybe have something to do with the organization involved in grooming these quarterbacks? So with Trubisky, we are going from, again, one of the objectively worst spots we've ever seen groom quarterbacks to not necessarily a quarterback factory. I know Big Ben's been the only guy there for the better part of the last 2 decades, but at a minimum, one of the best head coaches in the NFL. We got 2 good to great receivers in Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool, a rising tight end, Pat Freiermuth, and, at least a workhorse at running back. I know Najee Harris didn't have the greatest efficiency numbers, but Dwain, to me, looking at Trubisky, he's someone that's not going to be ranked inside anyone's top 15. Maybe he cracks the top 20, depending on what else they do with the draft. But he seems like a classic example of someone that we need to look extra hard at him or his skill position players, because Najee, Claypool, Deontay, Freiermuth, they're all going to be ranked pretty high in fantasy boards. Why shouldn't Mitch be as well?
Yeah, I mean, for me, when I look at Trubisky, I think it's pretty simple. He's a quarterback that we know is willing to use his legs, whether it's scrambling or they can do some things from a design run perspective. We know they actually had different some ideas that they wanted to implement last year as far as the offense and some things they wanted to change that maybe they couldn't just because of the statuesque, version of Ben that we were dealing with this late in his career. And so when you take that ability for Trubisky to utilize his legs, and then you look at the fact that this will probably be the best group of receivers, not to pound on the receivers he had in Chicago, like he did have Allen Robinson, so I mean he had a good target, but then he had the declining Jimmy Graham. I think as a group, like this will be the best receiving core that he's had for sure. So I'm interested from a fantasy perspective. I don't know for sure what's going to happen from an NFL perspective, but to your point, I don't think we have to be 1,000% out on a guy just because he didn't hit in those first few years. It was the Bears, it was Matt Nagy. There were a lot of issues people saw with the play calling. So I'm going to give him a shot. I think it's not somebody obviously that's going to be creeping up towards our top 12 quarterbacks or anything like that. But the type of guy that, if you start getting down to like quarterback 18, 19, 20, he checks a couple of boxes that, let's just be honest, a lot of the other guys aren't going to check with the legs and having the weapons.
I think he's a little bit more like a Carson Wentz than a Sam Darnold, where at least we have seen him be a very good quarterback for a brief period of time. I mean, weeks 1 through 11 in 2018, overall fantasy QB7. We had 2 appearances as a QB1, QB2, QB5, and QB9 finishes all in that stretch, averaging 36 rushing yards per game. So that's really what it comes down to. Maybe, just maybe, he learned something behind Josh Allen, who also was, first a great fantasy quarterback before becoming a great real life option. Just a few things. I did some research on kind of this topic again, where the whole offense is ranked really highly, but the quarterback isn't. I was looking at kind of the best teammate combinations in fantasy a couple years ago, and 48 of 120 fantasy QB1s boasted at least one top 24 wide receiver and a top 12 tight end. Not a bad hit rate, and that does seem to be the case with what we're looking at between Pat Freiermuth and Deontay Johnson. And if you're really bullish on both Deontay and Chase Claypool, 74% of the instances of a quarterback enabling two top 24 PPR wide receivers also finished as a QB1. So to Dwayne's point, we're talking about someone that's going to be QB 18, QB 20. You're not going to draft him in your traditional one QB redraft leagues, but super flex, two QB leagues, even a waiver wire in the right matchup down the way. I think Trubisky offers a little bit more fantasy upside than your typical below average real life quarterback. Now, Dwayne, I think we've, probably pissed off enough people spending so much time on Mitchell Trubisky to start off the podcast. We do have some serious high-end fantasy relevant takeaways, and the biggest one I think is James Conner being back with the Cardinals. I've seen some of you go out there and, make a little mistake. You guys are trying to say James Conner played 5 games without Chase Edmonds. It was 6. He only played 1. Edmonds only played 1 snap before getting out in week 9. So peep those game logs. Otherwise, I'll do it for you. Anyway, in those games, RB1, RB17, RB7, RB12, also RB2, and another RB1 finish. Averaged 5 receptions in those games. Dwayne, we got Chase Edmonds out of the picture. It would make sense if the Cardinals add someone else to the room. I doubt it's going to be just James Conner and Ino Benjamin for the entirety of training camp. But from a pure volume projection, man, injury potential aside, it's going to be tough to keep James Conner out of that top 12.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at those games where you didn't have Chase Edmonds, the big difference really, right, was the work in the receiving game and the routes run. You saw 66%, 56%, 64%, 71%, and 59% routes per dropback in those games without Chase Edmonds. Targets per route run in those games, 25%, 22%, 20%, 13%, 26%. So yeah, if we've got a situation here where Conner is going to also get to handle most of the receiving down work, which as of right now, the way the roster looks, they could use Ino Benjamin, as a change of pace type back. But it's not like something where with Conner we haven't seen him be a viable passing game option in the past, because we have. He's not done what he did for that stretch with the Cardinals, but I think it's a situation where, Ian, I don't see how he's not in the top 12, fantasy backs unless they really unless there's somebody that they draft, right? If they draft somebody in the first 3 rounds, that could be a situation where we have to recalibrate and think, okay, maybe it won't be that way for Conner. But right now, looking at it, I don't see any way that you keep James Conner out of the top 12 fantasy backs for this season. Now, coming with that, we know that there's been, a lot of history of James Conner being dinged up. And I'm sure some folks will still even remember, I guess it was 2 or 3 years ago, right, when it was supposed to be James Conner season. And he was going to be taking over the Pittsburgh backfield. And,
I remember, Dwayne. Myself and all my fantasy teams remember.
Injury, well, I know, and people don't let go of that stuff. So, it'll be interesting to see what kind of impact that has on his ADP. But if he somehow settles into like an early 3rd round pick, I think that's really going to be valuable. My guess is he's going to sneak into the 2nd round. But we'll have to wait and see. Anything after that, is going to be an absolute value on James Conner.
The injury laundry list is awfully long. I will say, though, he's been dinged up in some of these games. And I know people kind of hold that against Chris Carson, too. Yeah, he only missed 5 games, but he left early in 3 others or whatever. In Conner's 5 years, though, 14 games, 13, 10, 13, and 15. So I'm guessing most people, if you just had to guess how many total games he's played in 5 years, would probably take the under on what it's actually been. Are you convinced that Ino Benjamin could now be a sneaky good handcuff that we should be targeting here over the next few months? We haven't seen him get much of a chance in Arizona, but under Cliff Kingsbury, whether it was Kenyon Drake, Edmonds, James Conner, David Johnson for that 1 year they were together, he's been one of the few coaches in the NFL comfortable enough to give his running back, whoever it is, a legit 3-down role. I guess the next man up would be Ino Benjamin for at least now.
Yeah, I think he's a guy that, for now, we'll wait and see. I'm not going to get carried away with it because, to your point, they still could easily add someone. But Ino Benjamin is a player that I like, when he was coming out of college. And, Cliff Kingsbury has been complimentary to Ino Benjamin. But really what would speak better to that would be giving Ino Benjamin some playing time.
Actually using
him. Yeah. And we haven't seen that. And even last year, whenever we had some of the injuries, Ino Benjamin really didn't get involved. They did some different things in the backfield to really help offset, not having Chase Edmonds around. So that's a little bit concerning. But yeah, I think for now, I wouldn't get carried away, trying to make trades for Ino Benjamin. But low key, yeah, I think if you can get the right price on him, or if you're drafting, right now in best ball and you want to throw a few darts starts late, you can. Come draft time, if they add another person, obviously we'll have to recalibrate on Benjamin.
Ino doesn't turn 23 for a few more weeks still. Keep it in mind, everyone, those later best round drafts. Obviously, the other corresponding impact of the James Conner decision to come back means that Chase Edmonds took his talents to Miami. 2-year, $12.6 million deal. I like Chase Edmonds. He's a fun chess piece. He caught 50 balls the other year. You can put him in the slot out wide. I wouldn't say he's quite Austin Eckler level, but who is? He's a plus receiving back without maybe being an elite receiving back. But my problem with it, Dwain, is the history of running backs where the original team doesn't bring them back and they instead get big money from another team is terrible. I like what Mike McDaniel's doing in Miami. We'll see if he can fix the offensive line in 1 year. We'll see how good Tua is. But my God, Edmonds is going to have to be the exception to the rule that we just shouldn't be chasing these free agent running backs that change teams. Largest running back contracts on a new team since 2016. Le'Veon Bell with the Jets, Chris Ivory with the Jaguars, Jerick McKinnon 49ers, Lamar Miller with the Texans, Deion Lewis Titans, Melvin Gordon Broncos, Carlos Hyde Browns, Latavius Murray with 2 separate squads, Mark Ingram with Baltimore, and now Chase Edmonds with the Dolphins. Now, Edmonds, his contract is at the bottom of this. Not every single player I just listed has been a massive miss. Mark Ingram had a great first year with the Ravens. Melvin Gordon, I think Lamar Miller both did some good things for at least a year or two with their respective new squads. But Chase Edmonds, Dwain, I guess my biggest issue with it is, it's a decent contract, but it's not a big enough contract to ensure any sort of 3-down role. We've only seen Chase Edmonds have, I believe, 5 career games with at least 15 carries. He seems like the type of player that probably would be typecast as more of a pure scat back by the NFL. Okay, it might be fun, and we can talk about these, chess piece that can be used all over the formation. At the end of the day, those types of players aren't getting enough touches to really warrant top 24 treatment in fantasy.
Yeah, I think the positive for Edmonds versus some of the players that you named, he's definitely got more tread left, right, than what some of those guys we talked about and where they were from a standpoint of, workloads that they had endured to that point in their career whenever they changed teams. So, and we have seen Edmonds be explosive. In fact, last year he ranked number 4 in the NFL out of players with at least 100 carries. He had 16% of his carries go for 10 yards or more. So that's his explosive rushing rate. So we know he's got some juice, but to your point, he's just never truly handled that much. He's had a few games where he's done it, but overall for the first 4 seasons has never gotten over 25% of the team's rushing attempts. Could we see, Mike McDaniel just completely unleash Chase Edmonds? It's Chase Edmonds could do that. It's within the range of outcomes for sure. But if all of a sudden, his ADP were to start creeping up and folks wanted to treat him as the 1A option in Miami, most likely his ADP is going to get to a spot, Ian, where I'm not going to really want to partake. Versus if it stays, say round 7, 8, 9, somewhere in that range, I would, even if they added someone else, I would be much more willing to really buy in on Chase Edmonds, because then, the way I'm looking at him is RB3 with RB2 upside. And so I would be willing to spend draft capital in upcoming fantasy drafts in that range, but it's not something that I'm going to get carried away with if he just starts shooting up draft boards. And for now, until they add someone else, he's gonna go up. So typically the way I handle a lot of these sorts of things is on these news cycles, whenever their value surges more than what I'm comfortable with, I just stop buying. And eventually you get a down cycle on a lot of these players. So if, say, for example, all of a sudden, the Dolphins turn around and draft a running back, what's going to happen? Chase Edmonds' value is going to drop. At that point, I might be willing to go ahead and grab a few Edmonds shares, depending on who they take in the draft and how early they spend that pick. But my guess is Miami is going to add another player, and most likely it will be in the draft.
Maybe bring my guy Duke Johnson back. I don't know. Just saying. Dwain, I pulled up your 2022 rankings. No one killed Dwain over. These were done in January. This is from the article. They have not been updated. So when you see James Conner RB26, there are several guys, that would have moved up and down throughout this. But Dwain, just kind of, again, big picture idea-ish. We're not going to have our finalized rankings here for a little bit, but kind of looking at where we might be comfortable taking Edmonds. I agree with you. I think it's going to have to be in that RB3 range, because when we see guys like Devin Singletary, Josh Jacobs, Michael Carter, man, even Miles Sanders, Kareem Hunt, and the Patriots guys, I just feel like we have a better guarantee and arguably a better offense, maybe not for Michael Carter, but at least for Jacobs and the Patriots, probably a better offense to work with as well. So do you Edmonds probably around RB30? That's about the spot we're comfortable with him.
Yeah, that I think that would put him in the right tier,
Yeah.
as far as, when you look at the other guys that are sitting around him. And again, I think he does have upside. Like, it's in his range of outcomes that all of
And
a
he
sudden.
should be the pass catcher. That's what we want.
Yes, yes. So he already probably has the role that's one of the harder ones to get. But if you look at the 49ers offense, right, which is where Mike McDaniel comes from, we do expect to see more heavy personnel, probably see a little bit less utilization, right, of the passing down back. Now, things can be a little bit different from team to team. Game scripts matter a lot. But to your point, he should have the passing down role. And I think he does have upside to grow into a bigger role. You just don't want to spend like that's going to happen, in your draft, in my opinion. In certain places, you want to really buy into, the uncertainty, of backfields. But typically when I'm doing that, I'm going to take the player that's cheaper.
Moving right along, the big deal of the day. Christian Kirk, the Jacksonville Jaguars, $84 million is the max contract. Now, we haven't gotten the full details. You might have to win back-to-back MVPs or something ludicrous and able to get there. It does seem like, was it Dwain, $72 million, I believe, is like the non-ridiculous kind of valuation we're getting right now. So that puts him really at the top of the list in terms of these high-priced, again, free agent transfers, players that switch teams. In terms of total contracts right now, only DeAndre Hopkins and Julio Jones are higher in total valuation, which is, I think, actually on a per year basis. So that's absolutely bonkers. But yeah, just like running back, just like tight end, just like every position, these players that change teams, it does tend to be a red flag, even when a bunch of money is thrown at them. Kirk now has the largest new contract from a wide receiver that has switched teams in free agency since 2016. Behind him, we had Kenny Golladay with the Giants, Sammy Watkins with the Chiefs, Pierre Garçon with the 49ers, Tyrell Williams with the Raiders. He got hurt. My bad, man. Allen Robinson, Bears, Paul Richardson, Washington, also got hurt. Marvin Jones with the Lions, Robert Woods with the Rams, obviously had some great years for. He got hurt. Golden Tate with the Giants and Corey Davis with the Jets. Verdict still a bit out there. So it's not that these guys can't produce, but man, when you got to switch quarterbacks, when you're now going to a different organization with a new pecking order, it just doesn't seem to work out more times than not. So Dwain Kirk, I think we all like it. Like, he's a quality number 2 receiver. I think you'd probably feel better about him if he was, I kind of treat him like Michael Gallup. I think he can be your number 2 receiver. You probably feel a little bit better about him as your number 3. But man, when they're paying him this amount of money, it seems like he should be the one. But my God, Dwain, it's just trying to figure this out in fantasy is so tough because we saw Trevor Lawrence last year. That was terrible. Marvin Jones is still there. Robinson, ETN. I don't think they're necessarily done adding to the wide receiver room. I don't want to just completely repeat the Edmonds analysis, but I think it's almost similar. Like, as a low end, wide receiver 3, maybe probably a little bit lower valuation than Edmonds, but around that wide receiver 36 range, okay, I'd be fine getting in on the Kirk race. But if we're going to see people treating his contract as a big time tell that he's all of a sudden going to be force fed targets and we start talking wide receiver 2 range, I'm not denying he has that upside. I will probably not be buying him at that price tag.
Yeah, I think that wide receiver 3 range, I think, is fine, depending on what else happens as far as, the acquisitions that the Jaguars make in the passing game. But I mean, looking at Kirk, I mean, he's only going to be 25 years old. So he's one of the younger talents available, which probably helped him from a contract standpoint as far as the free agents go. They had this, if you look at all the free agents at receiver, he had, and this is even back when we had, Godwin still in the pool, Devontae Adams in the pool, but he had the 7th highest Pro Football Focus receiving grade of 72.7, 3rd best target share at 18%, and 5th best yards per route run at 1.81. So, I mean, there are definitely some things to like. But to your point, I like thinking of Christian Kirk more as a 2nd or 3rd option, not necessarily the lead option. But having said that, I mean, it could be a situation. If you look back at Doug Peterson, look at a lot of the offenses that he's really been over. He hasn't had an alpha receiver. He's really been more of a spread it around 18 to 20% across 2 or 3 guys. No true one target hog, at 25, 30%. Now, that has to come back to the receivers, who earns the targets, who gets open, all those sort of things. But it could just be really more of a spread it around across 3 guys, no one really stepping, forward and just becoming like a target hog of any sort, like what some of us may be looking for.
So I've seen a lot of the people, kind of mocking the contract, saying, oh, you paid $84 million for a slot receiver. And Kirk has played in the slot and out wide during his time with Cardinals. He's not, someone that like only stays in the slot for the entirety of every single game or anything. With that said, certainly did see his production take a nice boom when he was working from the friendly confines of the slot. 91.9 PFF receiving grade, 4.77 yards per route run, and 121.8 QB rating when targeted on, when he was aligned in the slot. When he was aligned out wide, drops all the way to 62.1 PFF receiving grade, 1.16 yards per route run, 87.3 QB rating when targeted. I would note that the averages are higher for players out of the slot than out wide, just naturally. Every single player is just harder for defenses to guard them. You have more room to work with and everything, but it has been more extreme for Kirk out in the slot. I will say as a rookie, I'm going to pull some film up here for you guys watching either live or on YouTube. He did do some good things outside. Like, I don't think he's incapable, but obviously if you want to get the most out of him, wrong thing. If you want to get the most out of him, I just think, you're going to be better off using him in the slot. The problem, Dwayne, is that maybe Laviska Shenault is still in the slot. We always make a joke kind of out of, Laviska needs all these guys now to get injured in order to cash in. Can definitely add Kirk to that list, but I'm just wondering, man, like, do you think Viska is valuable enough to Jaguars still to force Kirk to play where he's not most comfortable?
Oh, man, I think that's a great question. But my thought is if you're going to pay Kirk all this money, like, I would put him where he's going to be the most beneficial to the team, which, I mean, obviously he's played well in the slot. I think the other thing to remember with Kirk is it's not like this is the first time, where he's really going to be in a situation where he's not behind like a big name receiver. I mean, last year, DeAndre Hopkins was out for a good stretch. Now, you also had Kyler Murray battling through an injury, missing games as well during some of that, which obviously impacted Kirk, playing with McCoy rather than playing with Kyler Murray. But I don't think we can look at this as a situation of being, wow, this is a guy that's just been in a shadow like his whole career, and now's his first chance to break out. Like he's had some opportunities, and he's not been bad with them, right? No. It's earned him this contract. He's been good, but I wouldn't say he's been great.
Triple-digit targets last year. Again, it just comes down to Kyler Murray. You guys, any sort of like Kyler Murray being on running back talk is absolutely ridiculous. You look at his passing numbers against anyone. The guy's a top 12 quarterback, basically any metric you want to pull up. Trevor Lawrence, I would hope he gets better, because if he doesn't, triple-digit targets from him aren't going to produce all that much. 32nd among 44 qualified quarterbacks in PFF passing grade last year, 40th in yards per attempt, 34th in adjusted completion rate. Hopefully adding guys like Kirk, help improve Lawrence. Good for the Jaguars for trying to get him some other weapons. Probably, I think definitely overpaid to do so. Hopefully, at a minimum, makes their franchise quarterback.
Max value. We have the details on the deal now. Max value of the contract's $84 million. $20 million of it is a signing bonus. His salaries over these 4 years will be $1.5 million, $15.5 million, $14.5 million, $15.5 million. He'll have roster bonuses of $500K, workout bonuses $500K, annual incentives $3 million, and a 2024 roster bonus of $1 million. So a lot of it really is in the salary. This is all coming from Field Yates on Twitter.
Okay. Might be one of those two when we look a little bit closer and you can get out of it after a couple years, as is always the case. But at a minimum, 2022, good for Christian Kirk getting paid. Couple other deals that came down today. None of these I don't think we have to devote as much time to as the first couple topics, but Braxton Berrios is back on a 2-year, $12 million deal with the Jets. We're going to have Elijah Moore starting as one outside receiver, Corey Davis as the other. Maybe, just maybe, Dwain Barrios is in the slot. Now, I don't want to just make the mistake of comping, one white slot receiver to another white slot receiver. With that said, doesn't this remind you a little bit of the Raiders situation going into last year with Renfro, where everyone was just, looking at Ruggs and Brian Edwards and the things they could do on the outside, where if you look a little bit closer, we saw Zach Wilson in this offense, even in the post-Gase era, continue to pepper the slot for extended stretches. Like, I'm not recommending putting Barrios ahead of Moore or Davis or anything, but man, if we can make it through the rest of free agency and the draft, Barrios is still projecting to be a starting slot receiver, he might not be a bad guy to draft at the end of full PPR sites, because as much, I think we have this like fallacy in our minds about what upside really is. Like, upside in full PPR scoring is someone catching 10 balls for 100 yards. We'll take that over the guy that only needs 5 catches to get there, because it's just more points. It's stupid the way it works. I don't support getting an entire point for just catching the ball, but it's the game we play. So Braxton Berrios, late round darling perhaps, Dwayne, or am I just getting too hyped up on the first day of free agency?
Well, I mean, you're always hyped up, Ian.
That's
But
true.
here's my thought. This is what I would watch on the Braxton Berrios thing. Let's see what the Jets do. Do they add tight ends? Do they add a fullback?
Yeah.
Because if they don't, and the hand tip that they give us is they probably are going to use more 11 personnel. Because I mean, think about this. Like, this is an offense that's really comes from just like what we were just talking about with the Dolphins, it really comes from the 49ers style of offense, which is typically more heavy formations. Now, again, game scripts have a lot to do with it. When you're trailing all the time, you're going to have more receivers on the field no matter what. But whenever you look at the way that the Jets are currently set up, they just don't have a lot of tight ends. They don't have a fullback. So it may just make the most sense for them to really use 11 personnel more. And Braxton Berrios, man, has been really good when he's been on the field. So if you look at him in 2020, targets per route run, 29%. Last year, 23%. So this is a player that, when you put him in the slot, you let him get the two-way release, you let him work against guys that, just don't have the same quickness as him. And often it's against a zone. It could be against a linebacker, against a safety. Like, he knows how to take advantage of, those situations. Again, it's going to be the Jets offense. We need to see maturation from the quarterback. There's a lot of ifs, but Barrios can do his part. I'm pretty confident of that. Like, if he was given a role where he got to play full time from the slot in a team that ran 11 personnel 75 to 80% of the time with a quarterback to get the ball out on time, get the ball to him, I'm pretty sure Barrios could be a functional wide receiver in fantasy football in the top 36 receivers. I think he could do it.
Dude, he was just a first-team All-Pro as a returner. This is not like this, it's not like he can't get yak. This is an explosive slot receiver. And we actually saw at the end of last year, like when Moore and Davis were out of the picture, like when he had the week 17 performance, I think he finished as the overall, was it wide receiver 1 maybe? Or at least, I think it was wide receiver
It was
5.
really high. I'll have to look.
It was a top really 5 performance, in part because he went 865-1 as a receiver. And they also gave him like a reverse that I believe was supposed to be a pass. And then he took off and ran it in for a touchdown. So it would make sense if Elijah Moore or a player to be named later is the one getting these design touches. But at a minimum, we've seen Berrios play good ball in limited opportunities, and now he's got the deal at least locking him down for 2 more years. So
he had a wide receiver 5 finish in PPR. Yeah, in week 17.
Won some people some championships, I am sure. So just keep an eye on that Braxton Berrios point. But that's a great call, particularly, with still looking at the Jets as a bit of a, Shanahan-based system. We know how much, his just fullback usage over the years has rendered their number 3 receiver pretty irrelevant. So good point there, Dwain. Last couple things here. Jeff Swaim is back with the Titans on a 1-year deal. Anthony Ferguson and Michael Pruitt still unrestricted free agents. I would guess this is going to be another tight end committee. We're going to talk about Alie-Cox and Will Dissly here in a little bit. When you get into 3-year deal, in excess of $15 million total, like that's a situation where I'd be more comfortable saying, oh, maybe they're going to take a step forward in this offense. That's a lot of money to be giving someone. Just 1 year to Swaim, though, certainly seems like they're setting up to again be another tight end committee. Titans were the most run-heavy offense in the league last year, just every single play. So look, with that in mind, I just think expecting anyone other than AJ Brown to be a high-end fantasy asset, probably wishful thinking. Dwain, probably the biggest real-life takeaway from free agency so far, other than the Jaguars really going out and spending, was what the Bengals did to improve their offensive line. We've all seen the freaking meme a million times. Like, people were trying, like, the Bengals make the freaking Super Bowl behind Jamar Chase in large part, and people are still trying to dangle that thing out there like the pick wasn't a success. Anyway, it does look like the Bengals have, decided to really try to improve the offensive line this offseason, and thank God for Joe Burrow's sake.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, looking at what Joe Burrow did last year, what the Bengals offense did, really, despite all of the sacks that they took, because those are usually big drive killers, and the Bengals were able to overcome that. Now, would they have been able to sustain that another year the same way? I don't know. It might have just been more of an anomaly. So you like to see the moves that they're making on the offensive line. Obviously, whenever you've got a franchise quarterback, you want to protect them. And so they're headed in the right direction with that. So I think these are very positive things. These aren't like top-level elite players, but these are really good players from a pass blocking and run blocking standpoint. Kappa graded out as a 71.4 pass blocking. That's 22nd with a minimum 250 reps. And remember, you got 2 guards starting on every team, and most teams don't even have 2 guards that are good enough to start. So anyway, you can take these rankings and you can kind of use that as your context. But 76.9 for Ted Karras pass block, which was 9th in PFF grade. So yeah, I think they're obviously both upgrades from where they were. And it's not just about having all superstars right on your offensive line. It's just about you're only as good as your weakest link a lot of the time. And so that's what the most encouraging thing about these two signings for me are with the Bengals. If they keep all these guys healthy, they get them working together, get everything meshing. It could be a situation where we just don't have to deal with the weakest link.
I did see a good tweet from somebody. Oh, here we go. Shout out Jay Morrison over at The Athletic. Look at this, Dwayne, how freaking similar the Christian Kirk, Tyler Boyd numbers are. They both have exactly 2,902 receiving yards, in their first 4 years in the league. 15 versus 17 touchdowns. The drops are one away. Even the receptions and targets are close too. Tyler Boyd making $10 million a year. Go get paid. Go play NFL. If you're a kid, for some reason, listening to this podcast and you're playing cornerback, go learn how to catch the ball. That's where you're getting paid these days. After the Bengals, we got a couple tight end news before we touch on some things that went on Sunday. Will Dissly back to the Seahawks. 3 years, $24 million. Dwayne, I know he was banged up last year, but like Gerald Everett by the end of the year was just completely, had overtaken Dissly as the Seahawks every down tight end. I mean, you traded for Noah Fant. Clearly that seems like it wasn't as big of a deal to them at this point if you're going to bring back Dissly. We say this a lot in the podcast. When you have more than one real-life tight end consistently involved in your offense, it's really tough to even get one fantasy relevant option. Do you think this is a death blow to Noah Fant, or should we maybe chill out and just hope for a lot of 2 tight end sets?
I think we have to chill out just because I think, we saw last year the way they wanted to use Dissly, and I think Noah Fant's an upgrade over Gerald Everett. Right. So with Gerald Everett, he was pretty much the main guy on the passing downs. Now, you got to kind of dismiss the early part of the season because both guys were in and out of the lineup. But if you look at week 10, basically on for the Seahawks, both of the guys were pretty much healthy throughout those weeks. Still a few little nicks in here and there. But you saw Gerald Everett actually out there for 74% of the passing plays. He was in a route, right? Versus you had Will Dissly only reaching 40% one time in those 10 weeks. And honestly, a lot of those times that comes down to whenever they're playing in a game where they're trying to mix things up more because they're keeping it close, and they're using more 12 personnel, things like that. So it wasn't really coming at the expense of, Gerald Everett. Now, would we have rather seen this not happen? Yeah, because we were hoping for 90% routes run per dropback for Noah Fant, right. And he could set a career high in that category. Which typically, when you get to 80%, if you have the talent that you see with Fant, I know Tyler Higbee is the exception. Ian, typically when you get to 80% routes per dropback, you have a really good shot at being a top 6 tight end, regardless of how good your offense is. So I was excited about Fant this year. Obviously, you still got Tyler Lockett, still got DK Metcalf, so there are other obstacles to overcome as well. So I think this does take off a little bit of the upside. But if it depresses his ADP a little bit, I'll take it. That's what I would actually like to see is if it depresses that ADP a little bit, because I think there's still a good chance that Fant hits the 80%, 85% mark, even with Dissly back. But obviously there's a little bit more risk now with Fant. He could be stuck more around that 70 to 75% mark. I don't think it's going to be as big of a deal as playing with Albert O, because Albert O was really a much better receiver, really, than Will Dissly. So he was much more likely to get on the field and actually still routes, whereas Dissly, a lot of his work could still come in the run blocking.
You could argue that the process last year on Gerald Everett as the prime late round fantasy tight end was right, because he was getting the every down role by week 3. Unfortunately, he got COVID, and then it was a kind of a elongated stretch of 4 or 5 weeks. And then Russ got hurt and things weren't going great either. But he did flash that kind of every week tight end 1 potential. Obviously, it sucks that, we don't have exactly Russell Wilson there anymore to help out the Seattle tight end. Small downgrade going on there. But maybe, just maybe, Drew Lock can, at least coexist in that moment between getting the snap and dumping the ball a couple yards downfield. Mo Alie-Cox, 3 years, $18 million. Jack Doyle did retire. They do have their 4th round pick from 2021, Kylan Granson. He was always basically out there. It wasn't quite a 3-way committee at tight end. It would be kind of like Doyle playing, 50, 60% of the snaps. Mo Alie-Cox maybe closer to 30, 40. And Granson was kind of a distant third option. Wouldn't be shocked, though, if he does, take a nice bump ahead in year 2. We almost never see rookie tight ends do much of anything. It makes sense. You got to come in and be a high-end blocker and receiver in year 1. That's tough business. So, Dwayne, are you drinking the Kool-Aid here with Mo Alie-Cox? Because we've seen the guy, man. When he gets targets, he makes good use out of them. Unfortunately, we don't know who the quarterback is, and just the history of Frank Reich, man, usually involves using multiple tight ends in his offense.
Yeah, I mean, both these last two tight ends, whether it's Fant, Disley, or Alie-Cox, like the quarterback situation is a complete unknown. So, I mean, if Deshaun Watson lands in one of these places and he's actually, setting all legal things aside, just talking fantasy football, like obviously that is great for wherever he lands. For Alie-Cox, like the way I'm looking at him right now, like I'm with you. I expect him to be the lead tight end on the Colts this year, but this is also historically an offense with Frank Reich, who also comes from Doug Peterson, who's also done the same thing. They like to rotate their tight ends. And I think at this point, it's not like Alie-Cox has, he's not like brand new to this team. He's been around long enough that I really wish they would have been able to carve out more of a role than what we've seen. So I think this is one of the things, those where I'm going to be willing to spend, a late pick, on Alie-Cox. I'm willing to go ahead and give him a shot, especially in like tight end premium leagues, 20-round drafts, like at the FFPC, things like that. But otherwise, he'd probably just be somebody I leave alone, leave out there on the waiver wire until you maybe see more from him, early in the season.
I hope he's like outside the top 20 again. He was one of my favorite kind of after I finally got over my, Chris Herndon period of my life. I was going after Alie-Cox a lot in the later rounds of best ball drafts last year. When you take Jack Doyle out of the equation, you can at least kind of wrap your mind around him being slightly more productive. Also, just shout out to one of my favorite Twitter accounts, Jetpack Galileo. He's noticed, like I do, how freaking big Alie-Cox is on the field and then takes it to the next level and photoshops him looking absolutely massive. So I do enjoy that ongoing Twitter bit out of him. Dwain, we did have a couple news items break since we got on the podcast. The Dolphins have signed Cowboys receiver Cedric Wilson to a 3-year, $22.8 million contract. Cedric filled in pretty nicely for the Cowboys last year as their number 4 receiver, whether it was Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, or Michael Gallup was out. Wilson will kind of step in, play wherever needed. Dude also has a cannon for an arm. They used him a couple times on reverses, and he had some very nice throws downfield. But Dwain, it was 1 year, man. He was never exactly, the feature point of what I think defenses were looking to take away. And he now enters a Dolphins offense where, when I was writing up about Mike Gesicki getting the franchise tag, one of my big takeaways was like, okay, we got Waddle. We seemingly have Devontae Parker if the season started tomorrow. He's not a free agent or anything. And we now got Mike Gesicki with 8 figures worth of reasons why to get him more involved in the offense. Cedric Wilson should probably be projected to be this offense's number 4 pass game option. And the Miami Dolphins passing game isn't the sort of unit that I want to be investing in, their 4th option.
Yeah. And I mean, so this is really interesting because it's like, again, another offense, we talked about it earlier. What kind of offense are they going to run? I mean, are they going to run a lot of 11 personnel? And if they do, because Cedric Wilson's mostly operated from the slot, not that he can't play outside, but that's really where Waddle played from last year. It's also where Mike Gesicki lines up. So who's playing inside, who's playing outside, and it may just be a real rotation. But I think there's a lot more risk starting to bake in with all of the pass catchers, in my opinion, outside of Waddle, because I do believe they'll keep him on the field all the time. But for the Dolphins, just not knowing which guys are going to play outside, which guys are going to play inside, how much are they even going to use 11 personnel versus 12 and 21. Again, like the Jets, we'll have to watch. We'll see. They've got plenty of tight ends though. They've got Gesicki, they've got Shaheen, they drafted Hunter Long in the 3rd round, so they'll probably use 12 personnel. But if it's a situation where, Mike McDaniel is going to run a very similar offense to Kyle Shanahan, we're going to see plenty of that 12 package. And that means one of these guys is getting bumped off the field, or you just create some sort of all-around rotation across all of them, which we really don't want to see. So, yeah, I'm with you. Not going to be very high on Cedric Wilson or really anybody in the Dolphins offense from a passing perspective outside of Jalen Waddle.
I was waiting for outside of Waddle, right? Okay, you got it. With Wilson.
Yeah, we're never giving up on Waddle.
What was interesting about Wilson, I mentioned now he was like the backup for every Cowboys receiver, but the thing was he would always go into the slots. There were periods where the Cowboys were trying to use CeeDee Lamb as their full-time slot receiver. Then Michael Gallup got hurt. And instead of, asking Wilson to go play Michael Gallup's role, they actually bumped CeeDee back to the outside so Wilson could go back into the slot. Overall, 500 of his 589 snaps came from the slot. Dwain, we shouldn't assume he can't work from the outside. outside. But again, based on the Cowboys having all those injuries all over the formation and not feeling confident enough to kind of put Wilson in on the outside for any extended stretch of time, I'm not going to be really betting on him to put up big numbers in Miami by any stretch. How, I guess, because now the Cowboys obviously have a pretty big hole at the number 3 wide receiver spot. We'll have CeeDee and Gallup. How would your projection of CeeDee Lamb change if we can kind of fill him in the slot versus on the outside? Because to one point, you've talked at length about CeeDee Lamb not getting as high of route numbers as we'd want, but man, like he's just been dominant out of the slot during his career. I feel like if they could add, a Chris Olave type weapon on the outside, get CeeDee in the slot, I'd probably be higher on him than if they did take the trendy Trayvon Burks and maybe have to use him in the slot and put CeeDee back on the outside. We saw in the playoff game, man, it sure seems like Dak is more confident and the offense is calling for more passes to the inside guys over the middle than consistently looking outside.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're going to move CeeDee Lamb all over the place. That's what I think. I think he's going to play inside when they can. I think he'll play outside when they're in 12, or if they happen to have a fullback and they use 21. I think it's just going to be Lamb, all over the place. And it does really, to me, just go back to the fact that we haven't seen Lamb, get to have a 90% route run per drop back season. Like what you were talking about. So if you look at the history since 2011, the average top 24 fantasy receivers in a route, 86% of dropbacks, 55% of them eclipse the 90% mark. And that was with me removing the guys that miss games due to injury. So these are just the players that actually got to stay on the field all the time. So think about it. CeeDee Lamb's already had 2 top 24 fantasy, wide receiving seasons in PPR format. And he's been 9% under the 86% that we typically see a top 24 wide receiver see. So I think that's still my biggest takeaway for Lamb is we're just going to get a shot at, him being on the field 85 to 90% plus of the plays. If you just take that alone and you multiply it by, the drop back volume that we expect to see from the Cowboys, I mean, you're going to see anywhere from an extra 15 to an extra 30 targets.
Quick.
That's without him improving his targets per route run. That's just getting more routes. So if he also takes a step forward and just becomes a true alpha beast, like Lamb's going to go nuts.
Top 5 wide receiver, real life dynasty, however you want to call it. Finally, just had some nice news break. Defensive side of the ball, but my God, the Chargers are getting loaded. J.C. Jackson, 5-year, $82.5 million deal with $40 million guaranteed. Former Patriots cornerback now joining that Chargers defense that is looking more loaded than ever. And apparently, Derwin James and J.C. Jackson were high school teammates. Shout out to Ari at My Sports Update for that info. Final thing was Teddy Bridgewater has signed on to be the backup quarterback in Miami behind Tua. I think that's a pretty good backup. Teddy,
that's great. They have a lot of slot receivers now. Teddy likes to throw underneath the slot receivers.
Dude, Teddy should be a backup till he's like 45 years old. That guy will just always be a top 30, 35 quarterback. You don't want your franchise like trusting him forever. But look, he filled in fantastic with the Saints. I mean, he's been in so many different offenses, and it's not like he's been terrible. We just wanted more out of it.
I mean, Chase Daniel's the true GOAT of all time backup quarterbacks. He never has to play, and he's like, I think I saw something on his like he'd made like over 80 million or something like that of an NFL contract. So Teddy hasn't quite accomplished that without even playing. But yeah, I agree with you. I think, he is a guy that, can come in, your offense can be functional. We like to think that Teddy doesn't make a lot of mistakes, but last year we really did see more like the big time throw and the turnover worthy plays started to get a little bit closer together than what you really want to see, with, your backup quarterback. But yeah, he's if you look at all the quarterbacks in the NFL, like he's going to be one of the better backups.
And yeah, 100%. Chase Daniel, the real life Alex Moran, no doubt about that. All right, everyone, before we get to some more news that kind of broke over the weekend, want to give a quick shout out to some of our sponsors. First off, how about our friends over at Manscaped? Can I get a round of applause, everyone? Today, I'm excited to announce Manscaped launched their ultra premium collection. Believe it or not, it's for your not so private parts. I'm talking a leveled up hygiene routine with your favorite manly scent. This is an all-in-one skin and hair care kit for the everyday man and covers you from head to toe. Literally, Manscaped is trusted below the waist. Now trust them with the rest. Join the 4 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped by going to manscaped.com for 20% off and free shipping. All you got to do is use code PFF. Again, 20% off and free shipping with the code PFF at manscaped.com. Lip balm, deodorant, hydrating body moisturizer, all that and so much more. The power of attraction is now in a bottle thanks to Manscaped. Also, shout out to our friends over at All 22, unveiling the newest fantasy football game that hundreds of PFF employees, including myself, have already been playing. All 22 uses weekly PFF grades as one of its main scoring components and tests your ability to build a full 53-man roster, offensive line included. If you've ever dreamt of sitting in an NFL front office, if you enjoy the scouting process, you're going to want to check out All 22. Basically a better version than that old like Madden Be the Coach video game. Why didn't they just make that a game mode in the game to actually make that its own individual game? Just a wild year in 2008 or whatever. But anyway,
money, Ian. One answer, money.
It's always freaking money, Dwain. Join the waitlist at all-22.com with nothing more than your email. If you join the waitlist before the NFL draft, you'll receive a special promo code for your All-22 subscription. Waitlist users will even gain access to premium content like inaugural, there we go, Ian, draft guides and season strategies, feature release announcements, and more. Be sure to follow all22_PFF on Twitter. All22. I hate their motto, man. Less fantasy, more football. It's more fantasy and more football. That's all it should be. More fantasy, more football. That's great. It's positive. I don't like putting fantasy down. So I love you, all 22. Change your freaking motto or I'll keep changing it for you. And finally, right now you can get 25% off any PFF subscription if you use code FANTASY, or you can get with the PFF sub. All of our locked article content, our NFL draft guide, completely unlocked mock draft simulator, 2022 free agent rankings with plenty of new information coming each and every moment of the day. You can check out the free agency tracker actually for free that myself, Dwain, and Nathan Yonke are updating throughout the week. Also, data and grades from the entire 2021 season. All that and much more. Support the podcast. Use promo code FANTASY for 25% off any sub. Now, let's get back to the show. Dwain, I was chilling on Sunday, minding my own damn business. Got about 6,000 words done with the free agency tracker. I was feeling good. I was ready to crack open that beer and relax. I still cracked open the beer, but then Tom Brady had to unretire and hijack the entire afternoon away from all of us. So, not the biggest surprise in the world. It was funny, like seeing the amount of victory laps. Like, oh, I called this. Like I knew he wasn't retired. Yeah, I think we all kind of had that go through our mind. But whatever, he's back. I don't think any of us saw a drop off in performance, in 2021, particularly not in the arm strength department. Last throw he made, as we remember, was that dime deep over Jalen Ramsey to Mike Evans for a game-tying touchdown. Unfortunately, Stafford had to, go and rip out the hearts of Tampa Bay Nation. But anyway, Dwain, is it as simple as running back kind of the same strategy as last year? Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, top 15 at least. Maybe if we get some, more health assurance for Godwin with Antonio Brown out of the picture, you can argue these guys can be top 10 wide receivers. Now that we don't have to worry about, the target volume quite as much. Rob Gronkowski still has not committed to coming back, but I think we're all kind of expecting that to happen. Once again, he looked better in 2021 they did in 2020, particularly before he suffered that nasty rib injury earlier in the year. And then Leonard Fournette, who we can kind of get to at the end because some of you are out there trying to mock me on the old Twitter sphere. He would be a first-round RB, and he has proven that. You can laugh all you want. This dude had 5 fewer receptions than Najee Harris on the entire season and 3 less games. The fantasy-friendly role that Fournette has in Tampa Bay is arguably better than anyone outside of Christian McCaffrey. You could even make an argument that he is rivaling Christian McCaffrey in terms of pure volume. And yeah, I think coming back to the reigning number 2 scoring offense is probably a good thing for our fantasy running back. So, Dwain, any sort of hesitations in just, again, firing back up the NFL's number 2 scoring offense as exactly that?
No. No,
let's go.
Tom Brady's
leading
leading the offense. I'm in. Obviously, they've lost. They've got some challenges on the offensive line, but they've still got a good core of offensive linemen. And Brady gets rid of the ball really quickly. We know that quarterbacks are partial owners, right, of pressure rates and sack rates. So I still feel good about them. And to your point, like not having Antonio Brown there, let's see what else they do, who else they may add. But if it's just Evans and Godwin, we'll see what happens with Gronk. But if it's Evans and Godwin and no Gronk, oh man, like that's really big for Evans and Godwin. If you add Gronk, still okay. And yeah, as far as Fournette, if he's back, like, wow. It's crazy what he did last year. I mean, if you look at the PPR ranks where he had a 2, a 1, a 5, a 6, these are his finishes. So I mean, not just great finish, not just good finishes where he's typically inside the top 15 every week. He also gives you those really big boom weeks. And we know Ronald Jones is a free agent, so it's most likely going to be just Fournette's backfield with Keyshawn Vaughn backing him up.
All wide receivers, running backs, and tight ends. Lenny was 8th in PPR points per game. So yeah, he is going to be in first round consideration. Would I love to get him at the top of round 2 instead? Absolutely. But first, he has to come back to Tampa Bay in the first place. So we'll put that off. Dwayne, I believe last year Tom Brady was like your highest exposure quarterback in all of fantasy. If you weren't able to get some of the top guys, you were happy to scoop him up. Does QB6 sound about right for him ahead of next year? That's where you had him kind of when January came around. Josh Allen, Kyler Murray, Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, and Lamar Jackson. I think all those guys, with the extra juice they can offer on the ground, in addition to the highlights through the air, they deserve the nod over Brady. But ranking him below QB6, maybe if you wanted to, put your foot down on Joe Burrow taking a step forward. But I don't know, man. Tampa Bay has already proven to have that pass game volume that we're hoping a lot of these other guys are going to have. He can't run, but my God, if he's going to throw for 5,000 yards and 40-plus touchdowns, he doesn't really need to.
Yeah, and that's the difference. We know that the Bucks are a pass-first offense. We saw the Bengals start to move that way, and they could very much be that next season. But we don't know it for sure. Like we know with Brady at the helm, and we know with Bruce Arians, there's going to be plenty of passing in Tampa. They could lead the league in passing attempts. Whereas with Cincinnati, obviously Burrow is a great talent. You have 3 great weapons, in the passing game that you can put around him. Offensive line is improving. So I wouldn't be against it if someone was like, I'm just going to go ahead and take Burrow. But the thing is, Burrow doesn't run just like Brady. So does really Burrow offer you more upside in a big season than Brady? I would argue probably not. And you're getting a more consistent player, with Brady that we've just seen longer. And again, we just know the offense better. So I would still lean to Brady, but I'm not going to get it's not something I would be super upset with. Burrow's a great player. So if somebody wants to take Burrow over Brady, I get it. I'll probably have them in the same tier, but I'm going to lean to Brady when it's my choice.
Other big news involves the Cowboys and the Browns. We kind of already broke down the Cowboys offense, with Cedric Wilson leaving. But obviously the other big news was Amari Cooper got traded to the Browns in return for a 5th-round pick. I also believe they swapped 6th-rounders in the deal. And the Browns accordingly released Jarvis Landry today as well. So there's been some murmurs out there that they've, been talking about potentially trading Baker Mayfield. Obviously, if Deshaun Watson gets sent to Cleveland, that would up, the potential of everyone involved in the offense. But Dwayne, we have Amari Cooper there. We have Donovan Peoples-Jones probably just going to be in that, field stretching role. Any sort of hopes of him having an expanded job, I think, are out the window. We know it's an offense that's also going to be heavily utilizing the tight ends. Do you think Amari Cooper deserves a boost in value in Cleveland or a subtraction? Because, yeah, he is the more featured receiver, but I think with the difference, this is one of those things that we've talked about in the year. Just because a guy might have the same target share as someone else, we do need to keep in mind with offenses like Philly, like Cleveland, the most run-heavy groups in the league, 25% targets in Cleveland isn't exactly the same as 25% in Dallas.
Yeah, and the challenge for Cooper, right, is he's never put up one of those truly big target share years, and despite the fact that, he's really been in situations where he was the alpha. I say he was the alpha. You got to earn being the alpha, but he technically could have been, right? He really could have been that guy, and he just never was able to take that step and do it. So, that concerns me, with Cooper. So in an offense where they could really try to funnel things to him, which could help offset some of the volume that you're going to lose in the passing game, to your point, because they like to run the ball so much. My concern for Amari is that if he gets stuck around that 20% target share number, which he hasn't really been able to get over in his career, even if you adjust for games missed, his career, 20%, 21%, 18%, 21%, 19%, 20%, and then last year, 17%. And even his targets per route run are always right around 20%. So I think Amari Cooper is who he is. Don't know that you're really going to see a situation where he would jump to 25 or 30%. And now we've got an offense that's going to throw the ball less. I think it's a downgrade for Cooper when you also factor in that Baker Mayfield is not as good as Dak Prescott.
We'll see. There's a quarterback upgrade coming, but Girl Scout gun to my head, I do think that Baker probably is starting for the Browns in Week 1. Cooper remains just 27 or 22 years old, depending on who you want to ask about it. All right, Bills re-signed Isaiah
Been in
McKenzie.
the league 15 years at 27 years old.
It's crazy, man. The actual stat though, like where him and Ridley are the same age but never overlapped at Bama, that is objectively bonkers, if you will.
It is.
But the Buffalo Bills, they re-signed Isaiah McKenzie to a 2-year, $8 million deal. This is really, Dwayne, I think a similar conversation as we just had about Braxton Barrios. Obviously a much, better offense that we'll want to invest in with the Buffalo Bills versus the Jets. But McKenzie, I don't know that $8 million over 2 years is necessarily, going to guarantee him a starting spot, particularly if Cole Beasley winds up coming back. Now, the Bills have been giving Beasley, an opportunity to request a trade or find a partner, but you got to look at McKenzie. He's had the 2 extended performances over the past 2 years. He's been fantastic. 6 catches, 65 yards, and 2 scores in Week 17 and 2020. Then last year against the Patriots in a big game for Buffalo. I believe it was Week 15 or Week 16, 11 catches, 125 yards. Many of them were clutch and 1 touchdown at the end of the game. So I'm not sure if it was at the end, but either way, big performance. Now, Dwayne, throughout the playoffs, like we were talking about McKenzie versus Cole Beasley, and we were kind of expecting McKenzie to just take over that job. Like he was just more explosive. It seemed like Beasley was playing banged up throughout a lot of the year. That didn't end up being the case, though. We did see McKenzie, kind of reduce Beasley from a full-time player to more of a split player alongside McKenzie himself. But yeah, we could have that situation happen again, which is not going to work out for either guy, where they're splitting reps with Gabriel Davis and Stephon Diggs starting on the outside. And hell, they could even add someone else. So I know the fantasy community has been infatuated with Isaiah McKenzie, but we're going to need to see Beasley get out of the picture. And then we're also going to need them not to add anybody else, I think, for us to feel any amount of, goodness about McKenzie as what? More than like a wide receiver 4?
Yeah, I mean, look, if Beasley leaves,
now we're talking.
Yeah, we're in on McKenzie because he really is the guy that can play that role underneath. Gabriel Davis isn't going to do it. Stephon Diggs is really going to work all levels of the field, but a lot of time in the intermediate, comeback routes, curls, things like that. So McKenzie is the guy that can get open in space, or he can just outrun a defender, like on these little drag routes and things like that underneath. Josh, Allen can buy time, get the ball to him even late, right? And then all of a sudden you have a mismatch situation out in space. So with McKenzie, if we don't see, Cole Beasley gone, then yeah, it's really tough. Like if you're in like a super deep best ball league, where some of these where you're drafting through round 25, things like that, then maybe you take a shot on Isaiah McKenzie. But otherwise, you're not really going to be drafting him unless Cole Beasley is gone. And if Beasley's gone, man, he has that wide receiver 3 potential if Beasley's out.
Beasley does matter in this equation. I know people love to just kind of, you don't need to be a fan of Beasley and everything he's done real life and all that, but I think people hold that a little bit too much against him. In fantasy football, we are trying to win fantasy championships, not win a popularity contest here. Dwayne, I made a joke on, I think it was Jenna Lane, the ESPN reporter, sent a tweet about one of the Buccaneers offensive linemen wanting to play with a broken leg in the playoffs. And I was like, some Greg Jennings shit. And someone else brought up good point. It's funny how Greg Jennings is the one we go to when T.O. was the one that actually did it. But it's Cole Beasley played on a broken leg 2 years ago. I thought I'd bring it up. And of course, when you bring that up, you get a bunch of people start talking about vaccines when we were trying to just, talk a little ball. So you're
just trying to talk about broken legs and people start talking about vaccines.
Dude, it is ridiculous, but I really think people are maybe going to be overhyping Isaiah McKenzie out of a hatred for Cole Beasley. So just something to remember, where Cole Beasley, you might not like the guy. He's still a pretty damn good NFL receiver, and he's going to, be an influence for Isaiah McKenzie's playing time. And that's all I have to say about that matter, because I just like talking football. Cardinals re-signed Zach Ertz to a 3-year, $31.6 million deal. I mean, we talked about this kind of the lead up to free agency, Dwayne, but no team had more available targets based on their unrestricted free agents than the Cardinals. Each of Ertz, Max Williams, and Darnell Daniels were unrestricted free agents. So really getting Ertz back, I think, was big for them. Now, We do have to look at his splits a little bit because, DeAndre Hopkins was out for, I believe, all but 2 games. Ertz was in there, but one of those games was against the Bears where like Kyler Murray only threw the ball 15 or 20 times. So I'm not going to use like a 2-game split of Ertz with DeAndre Hopkins as a reason to fade the guy because let's face it, he was pretty damn good last year. One season after, really looking like a shell of himself because I think of some of the injuries he was playing through in 2020. Overall on the year, in terms of just top 8 PPR tight end weeks, only Mark Andrews, Travis Kelce, and Dalton Schultz had more than Zach Ertz. So, Dwayne, where are you kind of feeling Zach Ertz in the ranks right now? Because, we're not trying to treat him as the number 3, number 4 tight end that he was in Philly for a long time. With that said, top 8, top 10, I think is very reasonable for the guy. We've seen tight ends age more gracefully than any position other than quarterbacks, and Hopkins will get his. Ertz pretty damn good in his own right.
Yeah, I think he's a lock as a low end tight end 1, and he's going to be pretty safe. And that he could give you more. Like right now, if you had to, Girl Scouts at your door, Ian, and you have to choose the pecking order of the Cardinals passing game. I mean, are you that sure Rondale Moore is going to get more targets than Zach Ertz? We know we would put DeAndre Hopkins first, right?
Yeah,
Hopkins 1.
I think I put Ertz second.
I think it's an argument. If somebody says it's not an argument, they just have on rose-colored glasses around Rondale Moore. Like
2A, 2B, one way or another.
Rondale Moore's who we want to see get the second most targets because we want to see Rondale Moore do all those great things we saw at Purdue, running after the catch and doing all those things. But in reality, like it's a coin flip on which one of these guys, and you probably have to say that you favor Ertz over Moore. Yeah. So with knowing that, I mean, he's probably going to get somewhere between an 18-22%, target share, somewhere in that range. He finished at 17%, or 18% last year. So, I mean, he's going to be right in that range. He's not quite as good as he was, at his pinnacle in Philly when he was seeing targets per route run of 25%, 27%, 24%. Those days are over. Probably not going to see the seasons with yards per route run over 2 anymore. But still a very functional tight end. To your point, these guys can play until later in their career. He'll be 31.9 when the season starts in September.
I mean, Zach Ertz, Yak, the best Twitter account ever. Like, we've been mocking this dude's inability to break tackles for like half a decade. It's not like even in his prime, he was winning with like overall athletic ability. So yeah, I do think he could age awfully gracefully. Also, just one final note, he actually did play more snaps in the slot or out wide in each of his final 11 games with the Cardinals. His first game was the only time he played more as a true inline tight end. One could argue, it doesn't matter in fantasy, but one could argue that Cliff Kingsbury, like, this is his way of running a 4 wide receiver base offense, like without pissing off the boomer mainstream media. Like, Zach Ertz is now effectively like a big slot receiver, but he's a tight end. We've called him a tight end so people can lay off him with that. That's just, Dwayne, I love my tight ends, like how they use storylines. It's one of the things that brings me happiness in this world. Just a couple more things before we get out of here. Everyone, thanks as always for tuning in. The Bears did claim Darrington Evans, formerly of the Tennessee Titans. Always seemed like Derrick Henry's potential handcuff. Was a 3rd-round pick back in 2019. Unfortunately, just hasn't been able to stay healthy. So my big kind of takeaway from this, Dwayne, not that Evans is going to give us really anything as a standalone value, but seemingly this was the first move the Bears made after they cut Tariq Cohen with an injury settlement. So the Bears depth chart running back is Dave Montgomery, Khalil Herbert, and now Darrington Evans. We've seen Montgomery just like almost like what we saw with Josh Jacobs towards the end of last year, like not the best offense in the world, but just getting volume and the amount of checkdowns. Antonio Gibson light at the end of last year as well. You can be in a bad offense, but if you're the team's undisputed 3-down running back like Montgomery largely was without Cohen, you can still be an RB1 in fantasy land. Now, we need to adjust for the new offense that's going to be going on in Chicago, but man, like if Tariq Cohen, my big point here, if Tariq Cohen would have been coming back to the Bears this year, that would have scared me a hell of a lot more than the current situation, which is looking like Montgomery, Herbert, and Evans.
Yeah, I think Khalil Herbert's the real potential scary part, for
That's
Montgomery, because you do have a new offensive coordinator coming in. Another offense is going to be kind of that Shanahan style. It's actually coming from, the LaFleur tree. So we'll see what happens with that. But Evans, who knows? Like, does he even make the team? But yeah, I think for Montgomery right now, I think you still look at him as, the lead back, probably going to handle 65 to 70% of the snaps with Herbert spelling him, but we'll have to keep a close eye on it. Like how are things shaking out as far as training camp, and are we starting to, hear that potentially, this could be more of a split backfield, and that would be something that would definitely catch my attention just because Herbert did play well in the limited sample that we got to see last year.
Luke Getsy, new Bears coordinator, has spent really the last almost decade with either the Packers and then 1 year as the Mississippi State offensive coordinator and wide receivers coach. As you know, Aaron Jones managers have seen over the years, Packers aren't exactly, lining up to give the number one running back, 300 plus touches. Dwain, once these ADP numbers start to kind of cement themselves out to free agency, we really need to look at Khalil Herbert because to your point, it could be a split committee or he could just, once again, be one of the more valuable handcuffs in all fantasy football.
Yeah, I think he's going to carry value, to your point, no matter what. It's just a matter of how much of a role can he carve out. At a minimum, he is going to be a good handcuff to have for David Montgomery in that offense.
Final points here, everyone. The Chargers re-signed some exclusive rights free agents. Jalen Guyton, their number 3, number 4 wide receiver, and Donald Parham. With Guyton, I think this just reinforces alongside the Mike Williams contract extension that Josh Palmer, it's going to be really tough for him to do much this year. I mean, last year it was Keenan Allen, it was Mike Williams, and then Guyton and Palmer were more or less like splitting reps. Like they don't have the same role. Guyton's used a little bit more downfield. If Keenan Allen misses time, like Palmer actually kind of steps in more to that role. They're more comfortable using him a little bit more underneath. Either way, though, their snaps and routes are just, so close, or at least they were last year. That's going to be a major hurdle for either Guyton or Palmer to be, any sort of a fantasy relevant wide receiver. And like when you put in Austin Eckler getting the amount of targets he does, it just makes things that much more difficult. Donald Parham is it's not the only interesting guy in LA, but he's more interesting than Guyton just in that he could theoretically be their tight end 1. Jared Cook and Steven Anderson remain unrestricted free agents. Now, the leap of faith we're taking with Parham is that the Chargers could view him as an every down tight end. When I talked with the Athletics' Daniel Popper before last season, he indicated they did not, and he ended up Parham never played more than 53% of the offensive snaps in a game in 2021. So, hey, he's only 24 years old, I believe. Last time I saw, he wasn't with the Chargers all that long. Maybe now they have a higher amount of confidence in being an every down tight end. But Dwayne, in addition to a couple of these other rooms we've talked about, not saying Parham's a guy we need to get behind. The same thing with Berrios and Isaiah McKenzie. But like those situations, let's keep an eye on this Chargers tight end room because if we're sitting here in May and they really haven't done anything else, all of a sudden we could have, a fairly full-time receiver with Justin Herbert at an affordable price in fantasy.
Yeah, I mean, even if he's only out there for like 65% of the snaps, but that equals 75%, of the routes, so he's out there mostly on the passing plays. His targets per route run haven't been in like anything elite, but pretty good. I mean, over his first 2 seasons, an 18%, and then last year a 17%. Definitely have seen worse. If you can get that number to around 20, and you can be out on the field for like 70% of the passing plays, you're going to have low end tight end 1, high end tight end 2 value. So to your point, we'll have to wait and see. What do they do? Who else do they bring in? Is it something where we think that Parham could actually see that kind of role, or are we going to end up thinking that's a little bit more far-fetched once they're finished with all the moves?
That is going to wrap up this edition of the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. Dwayne and I will be back at least Tuesday and Wednesday this week. We'll see if things are still flying on Thursday and Friday. If they are, we'll be back then as well. Don't worry, we'll be back probably Friday or Monday, worst case, and just going through basically every single team again, like we did last week, making sure that we cover each and everything, get set up for best ball and beyond. Dwayne, myself, and Nathan Yonke are updating a fantasy tracker on PFF.com, trying to get that stuff up as quick as possible. So if you have any questions about what we just talked about, and truly, and we covered even more players now, I think, than we talked about on this podcast, you can go into it, just Control F, find the player, and you can get some high-level fantasy thoughts, again, for free. If you want to get a sub, because why the hell not? Code FANTASY for 25% off. Dwayne, great job. Anything else you want to get off your chest?
No, man. No. Just looking forward to who else signs tonight. Now it's like the defensive players are all hitting. So it's just it's a great day to be great, as you say, Ian. It's free agency, like I said early to start off. We're starting to get a real idea of what do teams want to do, what are their rosters going to look like. And then, man, it's going to be projection season. We're going to be putting together where are all these guys going to be in our projections. So I'm super excited.
I just hope we don't get, I think it was the Monday night when we had the Antonio Brown Bills trade back in the day. And then we had Le'Veon Bell like getting all this, getting everyone hyped up, and he drops a shitty rap album at midnight and then like announces his decision like 30 minutes later. So for those of us that were waiting up to respond to it, it was like just a nightmare, kind of like his Jets tenure, but the man got paid. So it is what it is. For Dwain, I'm Ian. Thanks as always for tuning in to the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. Until next time, take care, everybody.